winter pressure. But Noah's pulse hammered anyway. Without thinking, he crouched behind a stack of fallen pallets. Old instincts took over immediately. His breathing slowed into the same steady rhythm he'd used during missions overseas. Shadow moved beside him and held position, eyes scanning, waiting for Noah's next signal. Every part of this place felt like a combat zone. Unfamiliar ground, broken cover, dark corners everywhere. After several long seconds, Noah slowly relaxed his shoulders. "Okay," he whispered. "False alarm." Shadow gave a skeptical huff. "Yeah," Noah muttered, rubbing the dog's ears. "You're probably right." He stood up again and looked around the enormous room. The silence had returned. Still heavy, still strange, but calm. "For the record," Noah added quietly, "I'm definitely not sleeping well tonight." Shadow seemed to agree. They climbed the stairs again, stepping carefully over loose boards and cracks that let freezing drafts slip through. Night had fully settled outside now. The windows had turned into dark mirrors reflecting their shapes back at them. Noah set up a small camping lantern on the office floor and lit it. A warm glow spread across the room, pushing the shadows farther back. It didn't make the place welcoming, but it made it slightly less hostile. Shadow finally lay down near the center of the room, but his body stayed angled toward the wall that had caught his attention earlier. Even as he rested, his eyes drifted back toward it again and again. Noah slid into his sleeping bag and leaned against the wall opposite the dog. He stared at the ceiling while the lantern flickered beside him. Every creak made him flinch. Every gust of wind made his hand drift closer to the combat knife he still carried. Old habits refused to die. After several minutes of silence, Noah spoke quietly into the room. "You ever get the feeling a place is watching you?" Shadow's tail thumped once against the floor. Not exactly an answer, but acknowledgement. Noah let out a slow breath. "It's temporary," he said quietly, more to himself than the dog. "Couple weeks maybe. Fix a few things. Get back on my feet." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. His life had narrowed into a single tight corner. This sawmill wasn't temporary. It was the last place left for him to land. The wind outside rose again, pushing through the broken boards and rattling the walls. The lantern flickered. For just a moment, the wooden panels across the room seemed to shift slightly. Shadow lifted his head again instantly. Noah pulled the sleeping bag tighter around his shoulders. Outside, Montana winter pressed closer. Inside, the shadows stretched long across the floor like reaching fingers. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Noah suddenly felt it. This place wasn't just abandoned. It was waiting. He tried to ignore the feeling. But sometime after midnight, something changed. Through the thin sleeping bag beneath him, Noah felt the floor vibrate slightly. Too faint to hear, but enough to feel. Shadow's head lifted instantly. His ears snapped forward. He was listening to something Noah couldn't hear. Noah slowly sat up. The silence inside the office felt heavier now, almost like pressure against his chest. "All right, boy," Noah whispered. "Show me." Shadow stood immediately, but now his movements weren't cautious anymore. They were focused, purposeful, the kind of focus Noah had seen moments before breaching a hostile building. Shadow padded across the floor toward the wall again. His claws tapped softly on the wood. Noah grabbed his flashlight and followed. The wall looked completely ordinary, just weathered boards darkened by age. But Shadow pressed his nose along the seam between two planks and let out a low rumble deep in his throat. Noah crouched beside him. "You're serious about this, huh?" Shadow lifted one paw and scratched the board once. Firm, decisive. Noah placed his palm against the wood. Cold, solid. But when he tapped lightly with his knuckles, thump, the sound was wrong. Not hollow, not fully solid either. Something in between. Noah knocked again, slower this time. Solid, solid, solid. Then, thump. There was again. A different tone, barely noticeable, unless you were listening for it. A small surge of adrenaline ran through him. Noah had learned long ago to trust Shadow's instincts over his own doubts. "All right," he murmured. "Let's see what you found." He reached into his pack and pulled out a small crowbar. Shadow stepped back but stayed close beside him. Noah wedged the metal tip between two planks and pushed. At first, the wood refused to move. The old board groaned like it had been asleep for decades. Noah pushed harder. Crack! The plank suddenly shifted outward. Dust rained down from the wall. Shadow let out a low growl. Not fear. Recognition. Noah pried again. The board slid another inch, revealing a thin, dark gap behind it. His heartbeat quickened. "This shouldn't be here," he whispered. He forced the crowbar deeper and pulled. The entire panel popped loose. It swung outward slowly like a hidden door. Behind it was a wooden frame, and inside that frame, an iron handle, rusted, hidden, forgotten. Shadow stepped forward and sniffed the air drifting from the narrow opening. The scent that escaped felt different. Colder, older, untouched. Noah wiped his hand on his jeans before gripping the handle. The metal groaned softly as he pulled. The hidden door opened just a few inches. Darkness spilled through the crack like ink. Noah crouched and shined a flashlight inside. Dust drifted lazily in the beam. A small room sat behind the wall, barely larger than a closet, but perfectly preserved, untouched by time. Noah pushed the door open wider. The hinges cried out in protest. Shadow stepped inside first. Noah followed slowly. The smell hit him immediately. Old paper, a hint of oil, and cedar wood that had been sealed away for decades. His flashlight revealed the edges of a desk. A wooden chair, shelves stacked with rows of old ledger books. Shadow brushed against his leg as they moved deeper inside. Then the beam of light caught something on the far wall. A portrait. A man stared back through the dust. Sharp eyes, trimmed beard, a face carved from years of hard decisions. Noah's chest tightened. "What is this place?" Shadow didn't answer. He simply sat down beside Noah, both of them staring at the portrait in silence. A hidden office, sealed behind a false wall, untouched for generations. Noah slowly raised the flashlight again. Maps covered one side of the desk. Ledgers lined the shelves. And in the center of the desk sat a leather-bound journal. It looked worn, handled many times, but carefully placed, as if someone had left it there, waiting. Shadow nudged Noah's leg. "Pick it up." Noah stepped forward slowly. Dust lifted beneath each footstep. The journal rested in the center of the desk, like it had been waiting for someone to finally arrive. He picked it up. The leather cover felt surprisingly warm. Heavy. Important. Shadow sat quietly beside him. Noah opened the book. The first page held only one sentence. The handwriting was sharp and deliberate. "For the one who finds what others forgot." Noah's breath caught in his throat. Shadow leaned closer, both of them staring at the page. Because somehow, they both knew this was only the beginning.